And finally, here we go for Arsenal's second summer signing, first notable summer signing being Christos Tzolis, a left winger from Club Brugge that we were linked to strongly a month ago from the likes of Hand of Arsenal, David Ornstein, Ben Jacobs, Fabrizio Romano, etc. But we finally got the here we go and the stamp of approval from everyone, every notable source on this signing. 34 million pounds. So if we want to break it down just on the fee and the value, this is a Trossard replacement most likely from what it seems like player profiling, which I'll get into in a second. But 34 million pounds, 40 million euros, given that we got roughly 20 for Trossard, 20 more million euros on top of that to get a much younger player that profile is very, very similar, is not the worst deal in the world. And 35 million pounds isn't the most expensive in today's market, especially for someone who's coming in as most likely a squad player, hopefully a squad player on that left wing position. But last time I talked about him, and from what I've seen online, most people haven't watched him that often or haven't actually been able to break down his game. So I thought I would go and watch a few of his games. Both against Atletico, one against Arsenal, which I've watched before, but watched it back, and then a few against Club Brugge to kind of decide what I took away from his profile, maybe some overall keynotes, and some pros, some question marks, some cons, and then I guess how all those things, how his signing reflects our transfer window in the future, because I think everything is coordinated. I think another one will be coming out tomorrow that speaks about some of those other signings, but for this video, I think I'll just focus on Tzolis. So I think the first thing I wanted to mention was, I guess, a contradiction between the stats and what I saw in the game. I guess the eye test. Statistically, he is shown to have good defensive actions, good defensive intensity, a good work rate. From what I saw against Atletico, against Arsenal, and even in some of the Club Brugge games, but in some of the smaller Belgian league games, but mostly in those first three, I didn't see defensive tenacity like I would expect from a Arteta signing, especially when it comes to a forward. So that would be interesting. That'll be interesting to see how he adapts. The stats say he's very defensively reliable, so that shouldn't be an issue. But from what I saw, and I can only speak as to what I saw, he didn't seem as intense in defensive actions as an Arteta player needs to be. I think secondly, he, like I kind of hinted to or mentioned earlier, he profiles exactly like a Trossard. He is able to receive, turn, and play in tight spaces because of his technical quality. I would say in terms of technical stability more so, right? You see Trossard often in games when he's playing well, he's able to receive the ball, and not that he's Neymar or something in terms of manipulating the ball, manipulating the player, but he's able to turn and receive. He's able to receive and then turn and manipulate his defender slightly with just slight movements to be able to pass or play. And he's able to do that. He's a very associative player, which is good because that's exactly what Trossard was, and that's why Trossard made some key connections. Early on is with Saka when he was playing more in the 9/false 9 position, and then later on with Calafiori last season, which was so integral to our first half of the season form. Just like Trossard, he likes to float. In a lot of his positions, you'd see him starting wide when Club Brugge were building up, and then start to float. And sometimes when they would make it out the build up and get in an area where they're in sustained possession and kind of in the middle to final third, starting to probe the final third, you would see, just like Trossard, you'd see Tzolis kind of float into those middle areas and, like I said, turn, receive, play. Receive, turn, play. So he's literally has the Trossard movement in him. I don't know how that'll translate to Arsenal or to the Prem, because ideally he can do it in the Prem as well. But the thing is, Prem is more physical. Prem is higher pressers and more intense, it's more intense games. So that translatability might be an issue. It might be a problem in terms of, can he actually come and pick up the ball in midfield, float to midfield, and turn. Kenny, it looks like one of his strengths, so probably, but we'll have to see. That's definitely a question mark there. I think he's a good set piece taker, and I think that's something that translates no matter what. So that's obviously good. He is good finishing. Generally, I would call him a solid finisher. I think he's able to release the ball quicker than someone like Gyökeres, for example, and he's able to release the ball. He's a solid finisher. Will he miss chances? Probably, but generally he's probably a better finisher than Martinelli in terms of, actually that's tough, but he's a solid finisher, and this is not someone like Madueke who's very iffy with his final action. And then I think the last thing, or the last two things, is like I kind of said earlier, he relies on technical touches rather than physical power to create separation. And that is definitely something I have in like my question mark section, which I'm getting to in a second, but he generally relies on technical touches to create separation to be able to get those strikes off. He's not using pace and power like a Barcola is, or like, in terms of power, a Saka is, right? He's using, more like Saka now, where he's trying to use his technical ability to create separation. And that is definitely a worrying sign, and I'll probably get onto that more later. But the last keynote I had from his game, or what I've seen from his game, is he is really happy to take shots from distance. It's not, like some of our other players or some players in general where, they like to finish in the box. They're a box finisher, or they're scared to shoot like a Buwadi is. Doesn't really have an impact in the final third. I know he's a midfielder. It's a little different, but you still have to judge that. Is the player willing to take shots from various ranges and various distances and various locations on the pitch? And he is able to do that, especially zone 14. You see him floating into zone 14 a lot, kind of like what Trossard was doing from time to time. And you see he's able to pop off shots. He's willing to pop off shots, and he's not clinical, but he has a good strike on him. So now I guess if we go down to the pros, I think the pros, like I said, he's a solid finisher, which is always good to have. That's something that will always translate is your ability to finish. He's good in defensive actions when committed. Like I said, in terms of, I've seen him participate in defensive actions and he's good in them. It's just the work rate that might be a little bit of a question mark. And according to the stats, he's good in terms of work rate and he's defensively aware. So I guess I'll give bias to the stats because of the limited scale or the limited games I've watched. And then another pro is that he can combine well. He's associative. So for him, it's all about the relationships. And I could see him building a strong relationship with Calafiori, similar to the one Trossard had. I think some of the question marks, obviously, I can't, it's hard for me after watching a few games to profile him mentally. So that's a question mark. His mental profile. Is he, Trossard has a good mental profile. Trossard is willing to step up in big games, in tough moments. And I wonder if Tzolis can do the same thing, because that mental profile is definitely something hard to replace. Another big question mark, which is why I didn't want Gyökeres and why I'm kind of very suspect about this signing, is he creates separation, like I said, because of technical superiority or technical small touches. In the Prem, every player is technical, every player is physical, right? So he doesn't rely on his physicality, and that's a flaw that I'll get to in a second, because he can't. And so he needs the technical superiority or the technical touches to be able to get those shots off, to be able to play. And so my worry is that how does that translate to the Prem? He doesn't look so technical to the point where he will be more technical than an average Premier League player. So then the problem is that if he isn't, how is he going to be able to create separation? Am I underrating him technically? Maybe I am, and maybe that's how he succeeds. But if he isn't, and he's like Gyökeres, which, it comes to the league and he looks average or below average in terms of technical quality, then that's going to be another issue, like Gyökeres, with creating separation. And that's what I'm really worried about, especially because of Gyökeres being our last attacking signing that I really was questioning. Madueke less so, because I saw the physical ability, the physical attributes, even though his final third is horrible sometimes. or his final action, sorry. But just like Gyökeres, that creating the separation in the Prem might be a massive issue. With Gyökeres, he relied on physicality, but his physicality didn't scale to the Premier League. This time, Tzolis, I don't know if his technical quality will scale to the Premier League because his physical profile, which is my first con, I guess getting into the cons, his physical profile overall does not seem good in any way, or it's a big con. It's something I'm really worried about. First, if you get into his burst speed, he doesn't have fast acceleration. He's not one of those. He's not a fast player. He's not like a Martinelli who can get the ball and burst on the transition. He's closer to Trossard. He looks, honestly, from what I've seen in the comps and like in the games as well, but I think this is more a comp based thing. He looks so slow on the transition, and that's something that's worrying because when you translate that to the Prem, that's a problem. And so that's definitely a worry, and also his overall physical profile. I mean, you look at his height, his stature, the way he moves, his ability to, I guess, receive pressure. I'm worried about that and how that translates to the Prem because Trossard, for example, he always was able to, put his back to a defender and receive the ball if he had to and then turn. Can Tzolis do that? I'm really concerned about that. So overall, I guess to summarize the pros and cons, he has a lot of good pros in terms of finishing, in terms of defensive awareness according to the stats, in terms of commitment, or good in defensive actions when he's committed, and he's associative. He can combine well. I guess the question marks are his mental profile, and I guess the cons is can he create separation in the Prem? And mainly his biggest con is physical profile. Can he hold up a player while receiving the ball in turn? Can he, because you have to do that on the wing as well. Trossard had to. Can he, how is his burst? How is his pace? Because it looks poor. And he looked about average in the Belgian league, so you translate that, and he'll be below average in the Prem. So it's definitely a concern. I guess to summarize my whole feeling on the transfer, there's obviously some big concerns, but there's some good pros as well. For the fee, it's nothing too concerning. Honestly, it's a little bit frustrating because maybe we could have spent that better on someone else. Use that budget to increase the amount we can spend on a different player that's much better. Maybe like, if Bruno Guimaraes, if our midfield budget is 60 to 65 million, we need Bruno Guimaraes, but he will only go for 80 to 85. I would have rather not got Tzolis and got Bruno Guimaraes. So that's the concern in terms of his value, his fee. But overall, it's not too much of a problem, too much of a concern, because he also has resale value. He's 24. I could see him going to Serie A and that type of thing, and being able to translate a lot better if he doesn't translate well in the Prem. So there's resale value there, and it's not like if he flops, it'll be a total issue or total concern, especially because he's coming in as a squad player, from what we're hearing. I guess the final point I want to make when it comes to signing, which clearly I'm not too enthusiastic about, but not too upset about, is how does this impact Morgan Rogers? And this is probably my main feeling. Obviously, Fabrizio Romano and other Ben Jacobs and other journalists are saying that we're stepping up our pursuit for Morgan Rogers, and this doesn't impact Morgan Rogers at all, which if it doesn't, fair enough. But my issue with that is, if you're looking at Morgan Rogers as a left winger, as we do, who can play in false nine, can play in midfield, but mostly as a left winger, then your two left wing profiles are damn near the same. Morgan Rogers is just more superior in terms of technically, in terms of physically, and probably in every way almost to Tzolis. But they're a very similar profile. They're a ball to feet type of player. I guess Tzolis more so than Morgan Rogers, but Morgan Rogers doesn't offer what a Barcola would offer or a Martinelli would offer, which is why I'm very confused by our priorities in this window. Because it would make sense if we got Tzolis and then we got Barcola and so would Martinelli. That would make sense. Profile-wise, it kind of matches up. But to get Tzolis and Morgan Rogers, confuses me because then where's our pacey option? Where's our transitional option off the bench or, to play in certain games? That left wing feels much more limited in terms of player profile, unless you're going to use Madueke on the left. But then who's our right wingers? It's like in terms of alternative to Saka, especially because of his injury. It's a very big question mark, a very big concern of mine as to how Morgan Rogers and Tzolis will fit in our team, especially because we already have Eze. But I guess that's something that we'll have to see in the future. I think that's probably what's made me upset about the signing. I think the player overall, the fee overall, I'm not happy, I'm not sad, I'm kind of content. But if this stops a Morgan Rogers signing, or if this, limits our profiles on the left to basically the same, just one is more superior than the other, then I'd be very disappointed in this signing. And that's kind of what is probably the biggest question mark and the biggest thing for me that's upsetting about this signing. But here we go, Christos Tzolis to Arsenal, and welcome. Hopefully he bangs.